Heavy is the head that wears the crown, to whom much is given, much is expected, or insert your everyday cliche here, and it probably applies to the current state of the Carolina Panthers as over the last 3 seasons, we've invested our first round draft picks in 3 players who, although have inspired some fire in the fan base, have also went on to raise just as many eyebrows after their selection, starting with quarterback Bryce Young, who would indeed took a haul for my Carolina Panthers to move up from pick 9 to pick 1 to select, and the questions of whether or not he was worth that investment are still ongoing to this day. Secondly, wide receiver Xavier Legette, who the Carolina Panthers attached a later pick to the first pick in the second round and traded that to the Bills to move up into the final pick of the first round to not only ensure that we had the option of a 5th round on Xavier Legette's contract, but it also put us on the hook for a fully guaranteed contract until the expiration of those dates. And finally, this year's first round pick and 8th overall selection, Tetairoa McMillan, who many people thought the Carolina Panthers were going to select a defensive player in that spot, goes into this season with questions about whether or not only is he good enough to be where he was selected, but was his positional value worth where the Carolina Panthers selected him at. So in this video, I'm going to give you a little background into all of these issues, and I'm going to give you my opinion on what it would take for all 3 of these guys to prove their worth to not only the Carolina Panthers, but the NFL fan base at large. And we are going to get into all of that right after this.
I'm from the foe. You dig?
Welcome to The Way I See It with Jamario Rashad. This is a Carolina Panthers fan channel. Please make sure you subscribe as I am on my road to 3K, trying to make sure this channel continues to grow as this season plays out. And as a friendly reminder, as I will continue to do all the way up until Christmas, all proceeds made from these videos all the way up until the beginning of December, all proceeds will be matched by me and my wife to be and donated to Angel Tree programs across the Charlotte, North Carolina area. We want to help as many children as we can, and I want to thank you up front and before it even happens for being a part of helping us to do that. So thank you, you the viewer. You do not know how much that means to me. So back to football. What are we going to discuss, or who are we going to discuss first? First up, we are going to talk about, of course, Bryce Young, somebody that has had that B word thrown at him for the majority of his 2 young seasons in the NFL so far, that being the word bust. I have not been somebody that has been willing to go that far on my spectrum of opinion to actually call him a bust, because I understand the context, because I understand the turmoil, because I understand the turnover that has been the Carolina Panthers over the past few seasons. I would never subject myself to being somebody that only places the blame on one person. That being said, Bryce Young, in his many opportunities, at times has done absolutely nothing to help his case against being called a bust. If we take a look just over at what he's been able to do through 2 short seasons in the NFL compared to what every other quarterback taken in the first round has been able to do since the 2020 draft, we see that Bryce Young is pretty much putrid in comparison to a winning record. I know that wins aren't a QB stat, but he was subject to this just like all of these other players were. And for some reason, whether one reason or another, and we can get into that, I probably won't in this video, that's for another time, Bryce Young and his overall win percentage or winning record has not been good, only surpassing over the last few years just Justin Fields at 5-20, and who's that, Jordan Love, who didn't even have a start through his first 2 seasons. So looking beyond just the records and taking a deeper look into the overall winning percentage since 2021, since 2020, Bryce Young ranks 11th in terms of quarterbacks drafted in the first rounds win percentage, only ahead of, as I mentioned a second ago, Justin Fields and Jordan Love, who was a player that didn't start any games or didn't play at all during his first 2 seasons. So Bryce Young is starting at well behind the pack in terms of proving his worth and living up to the initial investment that the Carolina Panthers had to put forth to actually get him, gutting the team in terms of wide receiver depth, giving up, attaching the next year's first. Everything was given up to get Bryce Young, and through 2 seasons, he's only been able to win 21.4% of his games. That is a 1-to-4 winning ratio, and that is absolutely putrid. So, what exactly would it take for Bryce Young to be able to move past these nasty narratives and get people to actually look past what the numbers are saying and actually put their eyes on the games and give and understand the context and actually give Bryce Young his just due for being the quarterback that we all know here in Panthers Nation that he could be? So in my opinion, what could Bryce Young do? Although this first thing I'm about to mention is not something that's going to be able to be done in terms of his overall career, this is something that I believe would flip the narrative in terms of Bryce Young just simply not being a winning quarterback. And the first thing would be to flip that ratio from 1 win to 4 losses. Flip that over to where he would currently be, or go. Okay, let me go back. He's currently, for his career, his win to loss ratio is 3-11. I would like to see that flip to 11 wins for every 3 losses. That's not going to be something that's able to flip his overall career stats this season. But if he's able to put forth that effort in this current season, I believe that defeats a lot of the negative press out there about Bryce Young. And that starts to lead people to believe that we may not have been fools for everything that we were willing to give up to get Bryce Young here to the Carolina Panthers. The second thing is more of a team accomplishment, but when you look at it happening, it's no scrubs that ever are leading the push for this to happen, and that would be making a playoff push. Being a young third year quarterback who not only makes the jump to being competent to being better than average, but actually leading your team and leading your offensive unit to be one so well run that you can actually make it to the playoffs. I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying that we need to make a run to the Super Bowl for Bryce Young to be able to prove anything. But going from what has been absolutely terrible, a terrible 2 year start so far, erasing what everybody likes to bring up being the last few games of the last season, if Bryce Young was actually able to take all of that, turn it around in year 3, and take the Carolina Panthers from worst in the division to near first. I don't know if we'll be able to get in front of the Bucks, but to be able to actually be in position to possibly make a wild card push, that would be amazing for the career and the legacy, the very young legacy of Bryce Young. And I think that's something that would go a long way into helping not only the fan base's narrative, but as I mentioned, the NFL at large, how they feel and the narrative that is around Bryce Young. I believe if he's able to do those two things, of course, that is leading towards him being seen as a worthy first overall pick who it took a haul to get. But the final thing that Bryce needs to prove is who exactly is he? I don't know if this has been spoken on maybe other channels or other platforms, but Bryce Young is a streaky player. When Bryce is on, Bryce is on. We saw that at the end of the season. Once Bryce Young got back inserted into the games, got a groove. He got a great wavelength with the likes of a Jalen Coker. He got Adam Thielen back from injury, and everything started churning for the offense. Once Bryce Young hit a stride, he was going. But we also saw that when the season started, and the first thing that he did when he took his little black ass out there on the field was throw an interception on the very first offensive play of the season, we saw him be absolutely horrible for the next 2 games and go on and eventually be benched. Now, which Bryce Young is the real Bryce Young? Anybody that claims to have a definitive answer to that is just guessing, and they are out of their depths because there is not enough information, and we do not have enough data of Bryce Young being out there on the field doing being at his highs or being at his lows consistently enough for us to say with conviction who exactly Bryce Young is at this moment in time. So if Bryce Young could put forth a consistent year, a full 17 games of good play, I believe that would do the most, more so than the playoff push, more so than flipping the win-loss record. Just having consistent good play, showing he is who we think he is throughout the entire season. I believe that does the most for Bryce Young in terms of making sure that he is worth every piece of draft capital and player capital and financial investment that we put forth and up to get him. I think those three things would be a great catalyst towards, proving that for Bryce Young. So now we are going to get off of BY and talk about the player that was selected the next year. In theory, this was the guy that was supposed to come in, take the reins, and hopefully we could see these two young players grow together. You draft the young wide receiver in the first round. The year after, you draft a quarterback in the first round. You draft your running back in the second. All of these things were good in theory, but we saw how they worked out. So we are now going to discuss Xavier Legette, a player who is becoming very, very famous throughout, the social annals of NFL, football, college, anything. He's been, in videos, hip hop, everything. Xavier Legette has had an amazing summer, but what we are going to be looking forward to was what he needs to do in terms of output when the season actually gets here. And before we do that, we first have to flash back and look at what he was able to do as a rookie first round wide receiver in comparison to other wide receivers since the selected year that I've selected for this video, the start of the decade, be it the 2020 draft. What has he done in comparison to all of the other players drafted in the first round? So in his rookie season, Xavier Legette had 49 receptions, 497 yards, average 10 yards a catch, and 4 touchdowns. But looking a little bit deeper into the stats, what he struggled with was only a 58.3 catch percentage and only averaging 31.1 yards per game, which is absolutely unacceptable for somebody that we actually attached a pick to move up into the first round to get. Now, some context with Xavier Legette that oftentimes get lost is, had it not been for our desire to make him a first round pick for what that could potentially mean for what we could do in the future contractually wise with him if he were to hit, Xavier Legette would have been a second round pick, a second round wide receiver. And I believe the narrative surrounding him, as well as the expectations around him, would have been completely different if you just weren't able to say, well, he's a first round wide receiver, and if you're in the first round, you should be able to do this. Just know that he's only a first round wide receiver because Brent Tillis and Dan Morgan wanted to make him one. That is the reason that we are going to forever refer to him as a first round pick. But the way that the chips fell on that draft night, Xavier Legette was going to be a second rounder. So we need to keep that in mind. But with that being out of the way, since he was a first round pick, we have to judge him against other first round picks. And since the 2020 draft, there have been more than 30 rookie wide receivers who had more yards in their rookie season than what we got out of our specially handpicked first round. We move up into the first round to select him wide receiver in Xavier Legette. And if we're talking, and that's not even that's just overall receivers. So 30 plus drafted in first through seventh since 2020. But if we're talking about simply first rounders, the output that Xavier Legette put out there isn't even top 15 in performance over the last 4 years. And that is absolutely unacceptable for somebody that you plan to be a part of this core and a part of this offense moving forward, and hopefully somebody that can help out Bryce Young. So what exactly Do we need XL to improve upon? What exactly do we need for this sophomore season of his to look like? In my opinion, I do not need for Xavier Legette to go out there and prove that he is just as good as all of these other first round picks who immediately came into the league and hit, because history would say that there isn't much improvement, or the biggest jump in turn, like a good skill position player comes into the league good as a rookie. A good running back is good as a rookie. A good wide receiver is good as a wide receiver. Although there is improvement year to year, you can usually see if somebody is going to be a star immediately, because nobody progresses from just a guy into a star. You see star potential immediately, and we didn't see that out of Xavier Legette. And something he has to prove that has been talked about since we drafted him is that he still has room to get better, and i.e. he hasn't exactly reached his ceiling. Xavier Legette was a 5-year college player who took advantage of the extra COVID season, who afforded him an extra year, who was at South Carolina all for 4 straight years and was not on anybody's NFL draft radar at all. He burst on the scene, had one amazing season as a senior, and he flew up draft boards to the point of where he was no doubt going to be at least a second rounder, but eventually made it to the first round. So we've only seen this guy be, have this star level or this potential of his for one season. Is that the ceiling? How much better can we expect for Xavier to be? And if it took him 4 years just to get this good, how long will it take him to improve in the NFL, as he does not have as much specialized attention as he would at a university? It's more so on him to determine which way his body goes, what he works on, how he's going to get there. We cannot definitively say that he is going to get better, because it's not like he showed year over year progression um, throughout college. So what we need him to be, and this is always going to, and these comparisons are always going to be there because of Dave Canales, because of his roots, because of where he was before he came to the Carolina Panthers. There's always going to be player to player comparisons, and with the acquisition of Tetairoa McMillan in the first round this season, knowing that Dave Canales, before he got to the Carolina Panthers, was coaching with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Mike Evans as well as Chris Godwin, it's easy to see that if he is trying to emulate the talent that he had in Tampa Bay, Tetairoa McMillan is undoubtedly the tall, big body, you throw him the fade balls, he's going to go and get it every single game receiver. But what does that leave for Xavier Legette to be? That would be the Chris Godwin of that offense, the guy that is able to be used with more utility, the guy that is able to take up space over the middle of the field, the guy that is able to be used in more gadget-like ways, more so than just being a typical X who lines up on the outside and just dominates on the boundaries. We need for Xavier Legette to be Chris Godwin light, somebody that can be used all over the field, while we have that dominant guy in Tetairoa McMillan, or AKA Mike Evans, however you want to look at it with this analogy. We need somebody who's able to dominate with another player, a star taking up majority of the attention on the other side, and usually getting that safety over the top help, leaving for a lot of the field and a lot of the leverage on the opposite side to be taken up by a wide receiver who has the speed and the ability to get down the field. So we need him to function as a Chris Godwin light in this offense to make it function as good as I think it can. But finally, and the most important thing, and what he could do to make this offense as good as it could possibly be, is to prove that he is indeed the downfield threat that we thought that he was going to be. Part of why Xavier Legette was so sought after and he flew up draft boards so much was because of just how massive this guy is at about 6'2", about 220, 220. I'm not exact. Oh, I'm looking at it right. 226'3", 227. That is a massive human being. But he also ran like a four, or like a four, like a low 4.4 or a high 4.3. He was an absolute burner. So we thought that he would have the ability to be somebody like DK Metcalf, somebody who not only could dominate at the catch point with his strength, but somebody who had the ability to just take off and burn guys down the field and utilize all that speed to make sure that we had a deep threat each and every play. But unfortunately, that is not something that Xavier Legette has been able to do in his young career so far. But if he is able to put together all of these things that I have suggested for him, and he can do that to the tune of an output of at least 800 yards and 7 touchdowns, I think that proves that what we invested into Xavier Legette was absolutely worth it, as he would be the perfect complement to our first round wide receiver in Tetairoa McMillan, and we would have that dynamic duo. Basically, we would have Tampa Bay light here, and I'm not really sure if anybody would be able to, if anybody would be mad about that if you drafted Chris Godwin in the first round. I think that's still a pretty good damn proposition, if I don't say so myself, man. So the last player we are going to discuss is another wide receiver who you've heard mentioned a few times in this video before, and I'm pretty sure all of us are excited to see. That being Nalo, T-Mac Tetairoa McMillan. Now, T-Mac was not only drafted in the first round, T-Mac was drafted with a top 10 pick, the 8th overall pick to be exact. So we have a lot stricter of a standard to hold T-Mac to, as opposed to how we were looking at Xavier Legette in the first round as a whole being the last pick. This is a priority pick. This is somebody who initially, if you pick somebody in the top 10, you think they have the potential to have a gold jacket, make it to the Hall of Fame in the future. So what exactly should be our expectations of Tetairoa McMillan, keeping in mind that the Carolina Panthers had the worst defense in the history of the NFL last season, the absolute worst in the illustrious history of the National Football League. The 2024 Carolina Panthers, led by Dave Canales and, more importantly, Ejiro Evero at defensive coordinator, had the most putrid, shitty, worst defense in the history of human existence. Keep that in mind. And the Carolina Panthers had that, all that information, all the tape, all the heartbreak, all of that, and they still decided to select a wide receiver for the second season in a row. So Tetairoa McMillan has a lot to live up to prove and to make the Carolina Panthers investment in him at this spot worth it, as they had trade partners, they had trade backs. There was other defensive players on the board. There were many options, but when the chips fell and everything came down to it, they thought all of that the best option is and was Tetairoa McMillan. So with a top 10 pick since 2020, how have wide receivers drafted this high in the NFL draft, how have they fared so far? Well, 50% of them were absolute superstars as rookies. Immediately, they didn't need any warm up. They didn't need any acclimation. They hit the field, they put their helmet on, they went out there and they bust ass every single week. As you can see, there have been 8 guys drafted since 2020 in the top 10 who were wide receivers. 4 of them had over 1,000 yards. My ranking in order is a little off now. I'm looking at it, but 4 of them had over 1,000 yards. 1 had over 900, and all 8 of them had at least 700. Now, in terms of college output and college prestige, Tetairoa McMillan is closer to the likes of a Jamar Chase and a Garrett Wilson, and I get also a Marvin Harrison in terms of what they've been able to put out in their final seasons before coming out into the NFL draft. And you can see how that translated to these numbers that you see on your screen. So what should we expect out of Tetairoa McMillan? Should he be what is, although still a pretty good rookie, should we consider him to be in this lower tier, this lower half of what we can expect of these top 10 players, or should we expect him to be one of these absolute superstars? So in my opinion, I believe that he needs to be one of these absolute superstars, keeping in mind everything that has gone on with the Carolina Panthers and everything that happened the last season and the season before leading up to this pick. This is the first time that the Carolina Panthers have had their own first round pick since drafting Bryce Young, and they decided that although we have the worst defense in the history of human existence, we believe that this wide receiver would be a better asset to our team more so than moving back for possibly more defensive players or possibly more players at all, or just taking a defensive player. Keeping all that in mind, Tetairoa McMillan must pop, and he must pop soon. Bryce Young must force feed this man the ball, and this man must eat game in and game out. I am expecting for Tetairoa McMillan to have over 1,000 yards, to be in that upper echelon, join those guys in the top 4 of those 8 players as having over 1,000 yards, being their team's star wide receiver, and being a superstar the moment that they strap their cleats up. I believe that Tetairoa McMillan will join that club, having at least 8 touchdowns, dunking on people on fade balls, and I believe he'll show all of the tools that he showed at Arizona. I believe will be on full display, and they need to be on full display in this rookie season for us to prove, or for him to prove to us, that he was worth the investment that we have put into him so far. But of course, something that happened to our receiver last year that unfortunately has caused a bit of a divisive issue amongst the Carolina Panthers fan base is we had a wide receiver who was a rookie who was actually outstanding in terms of what their initial expectations were, but that was not our first round drafted wide receiver. I'm talking about Jalen Coker, who in many's opinion, including my own, outperformed first round wide receiver last year in Xavier Legette. What we cannot have happen this year is for there to be any question whatsoever about whether or not Tetairoa McMillan is the alpha dog, the number one, the ace boom coon of this offense. There can be no questions about that. He needs to be the undoubted number one, the go-to guy, the top 10 pick that we drafted him to be. And if he's able to do that to the tune of over 1,000 yards and nearly 10 touchdowns, I completely believe that he would be able to do that, man. So what do you all think about this topic? What do you all think about BYXL, T-Mac? What can they do to prove their worth? Have they already proven their worth to you? Is this conversation being had too early? Whatever you all think about this topic, leave your comments down in the comments section, and I'll be sure to get back with you then. But until next time, I am Jamario Rashad. This is the way I see it, and I'm out. Peace.